has a plan. There's a way in which for you to deal with your doubt. Go back and listen to the sermon from last week and let the Holy Spirit do the work that's necessary with your doubt. The week before was Resurrection Sunday, and we looked at Mary. And so we're just going to continue on in this journey of looking at John's gospel and look at Peter today. Peter, as we navigate through today, you will notice that he had a pain that he needed to release. I'm giving you a framework here because after that I'm going to close this. I'm just going to talk. He had a pain to release. He had a longing to return. He had a meal to receive. Yes, a fish fry out by the beach. If you don't like seafood, even that might sound appealing. And then lastly, he had a need for reconciliation. He had a pain to release, a longing to return, a meal to receive, and a need for reconciliation. I want to read an excerpt of what I was reading this week as part of my devotion. It says, 4 bullets hit Pope John Paul II. 2 of them lodged in his lower intestines. The other hit his left arm and the other his right arm. The assassination attempt on the Pope in May of 1981 left him severely wounded and with considerable blood loss. His health has never been the same again. In July of 1981, the Pope, as he was given a public address, he talked about the perpetrator of the assassination. His name was Ali Akka, who at that point had been sentenced to life in prison. Pope John Paul II asked the people who were present that day. He said, "Pray for my brother, Mr. Akka. Pray for my brother, whom I have sincerely forgiven." He was shot multiple times with intention to leave him dead by this gentleman. He, by the grace of God, survived. This man had received what many will say a just penalty for his crime, with life imprisonment. And the Pope, in his public address, is asking the faithful to pray for his brother, the would-be assassin. And I want to keep on reading. It says, Pope John Paul II asked people to pray for his brother, and then 2 years later, he was to take the hand of this man who attempted to kill him when he visited a prison that he was in. And then in that visit, he quietly told him face to face that he had forgiven him. He even went on as to visit him often, so much so as to befriend the person who was his would-be assassin. In June of 2000, Mr. Akka was pardoned by the Italian government because he was petitioned, or they were petitioned by the Pope so that the man can be released. He was, in fact, released. They continued to know one another, and then when the Pope eventually died of natural causes later on, Akka's family sent a note accounting of this great love that they had received from a man who a member of their family hated so much that he was willing to end their life. And they mentioned that the Pope had demonstrated the gospel in a way that they could not even imagine. Pray for my brother, Adka. Forgiveness is a thing that when we're the offender, we long for. Forgiveness is a thing that when we are the person who have done something, we've done something that we know is contrary to our better conscience, we crave it. Oftentimes, if we're self-aware, we know that we're not deserving of it, and so we don't even ask. We may even hold ourselves. We hold ourselves accountable, sometimes harsher than what those around us would. Peter his story is told oftentimes by all the other disciples except for Peter himself. Peter is a man who Jesus found when he was fishing. Peter was doing what he was fisherman by trade, and Jesus was starting his ministry, and he, in Luke chapter 5, if you were to go back and read it, Jesus was being crowded, and so he needed a place where he can preach without being smothered. And so he climbed into Peter and them's boat, and he says, go ahead, push out from the shore into the sea. Oftentimes, that's what Jesus says to us, isn't that right? He comes and he meets you at the shore, and he tells you to push out into the sea. He meets you in the shallow end, and he says, let's go on a journey. I got someplace to take you. Yeah. Jesus gets in the boat, tells Peter and friends to push out into the sea, and then Jesus begins to preach to the crowd. And after he had preached this message, he then began to say to Peter and them, have you caught anything yet? And they said, sure enough, we have not. We've toiled at this for a long time, and we haven't. And Jesus said, go ahead and cast your net. And I'm sure Peter was thinking, I was really kind to this guy. He hopped on my boat without permission, I'm assuming. He told me to push out from the shore to the sea after I was done doing my work. I didn't question him there, although I should have. Now I'm in the sea after I've worked so hard. He's telling me now to cast the net. I've already done this. Sometimes you receive an instruction from Jesus and it seems like it doesn't make sense. Jesus, I've been doing that. I've already done that. Why are you asking me to do the same thing over and over again? We need to do something new. Jesus said, cast the net. And would you know, after they cast the net over, after they've tried it all on their own, now at Jesus' instruction, they pulled in such an harvest from the sea that they couldn't stand. They had to call for help from the shore. Their nets begin to break even. When Jesus had performed this miracle for Peter, Peter was so beside himself at this man who had entered his boat with authority and had gave him a command to push out onto the sea and had done this miracle that Peter, he said, he fell to his knees and he says, get away from me because I am an unclean man. I'm an evil man. You apparently are just holy and I'm not holy. Please create some distance between you and I. That's Peter's response. But Jesus said, no, man, I'm here for you. You've been fishing for the wrong thing, Peter. I have a job for you, Peter. You have been trying to define yourself. But before you were ever formed in your mother's womb, I knew you, your substance. I am your maker. I want you to be a fisher, but not for fish in the sea. I want you to be a fisher of men. Peter left everything, his career that he'd known, his family, and he followed after Jesus. And he was with Jesus throughout all the miracles as he journeyed alongside. Peter was right there. Peter was right there for just about everything. Peter was part of the 12, but he was part of the 3. He was right there with Jesus. Jesus' closest circle, Peter was there. As Jesus was going along his ministry, at some point, Jesus began to preach this funny message that Peter thought was like, I don't know what's going on with preacher, but he seems to be having a little bit of trouble right now. That's what Peter was thinking in his mind, because Jesus started to say things like this: I'm here to live this life, but my actual purpose is to come and to die. I am going to die. They are going to take me. I am going to surrender my life, and then I won't be with you guys in the same way anymore. Peter found that very, very offensive. Peter, every time Jesus would mention that he was to die, would rebuke Jesus. He said, no, you're not going to die. And if you do die, I'm right there with you. If we're going to lose, you're not losing by yourself. We are losing together. If we're going to war, I'm right there with you. Peter promised. And later on in the conversation, Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he said, hey, not only am I going to die, but one of you guys, it had to be a little bit awkward. Connie, just a little bit, right? If you're sitting around the table with just a few folks, usually tables got a couple seats around it. It's just a few of you in here, and the man is talking and say, I'm gonna die, and one of you guys is gonna betray me. I'm gonna start looking around. Is it me? Oh no, it ain't me. Is that he is? I know he tried. It's probably gonna be him and Jesus. I can only imagine what the conversation was like. I wish they wrote more about it because I think it'll be hilarious. Right? What was it like to hear Jesus say that somebody that's sharing this meal with me will betray me? What was it like? And Peter said, Jesus, I think this is strange, but I want you to know, if all these jokers around here betray you, I won't. If all these people leave you, I'm with you to the end. You my boy, Jesus. We are in this together. Then Jesus told Peter some hard news. Jesus prophesied to Peter that, Peter, thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your confidence, your self-confidence. Thank you for your declaration of love. But the way you talk it, you're talking cash trash. Cash trash. You're writing a check. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on. Help me breathe. I got to move on. All right, I'm moving on. I can't say that here in the guy's house. Peter was writing something he couldn't cash. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to say it like that, Alicia. Right? And so Jesus called him on that. Jesus was calling people out all the time. And Peter had that in the recesses of his mind. And then eventually the day came when Jesus was in fact betrayed. They met him in a garden, and then before that, though, Jesus had told them, my time is here, and you need to get some swords. And I'm always confused by that. You need to get some swords. And then they went and said, we already got 2 swords. And then Jesus said, that's enough. Like, why do you tell them to get some swords and they got 2? 2 is not enough. I'm confused by that. Right? Jesus said, that's enough. Then they go out, Jesus gets betrayed. And Peter said, well, we only got 2 swords, but I got one of these swords in my hand right now. And he was prepared to make good on his promise. Peter was prepared to make good on his promise, so he grabbed the sword that he had. And then he struck one of the people that came with the entourage of people that came to take Jesus in. For whatever reason in the text, it said that he struck him in the right ear. And that part is a little interesting to me. So I was reading a commentary, and they said, well, most people were right-handed. We assume that Peter was right-handed. If he struck the man in his right ear, it probably, nobody, when you strike with the sword, usually the motion is across. So if they're in front of you and you strike with the sword, you're probably going to hit the opposite ear. So somebody speculated, not me, but somebody else, because I like Peter, so I don't speculate nothing bad about Peter, but somebody else had the nerve to say that Peter might have struck this guy with the sword while his back was turned. They tried to make my boy Peter look like a punk. Either way, he had the sword and he used it. And then Jesus had the nerve, Alexa. He grabbed the man's ear and put it back. Peter said, you told me to get a sword. You told me to get a sword. We only got 2, that's stupid. And I used the one that we have while this guy, I could get him, he's turned around. And you going to help him? You going to put his ear back? Well, what is this? And then these people here to get you and you're just going to go? He's just going to just take me. This ain't no war. What is going on? Where is this brave man that I knew? Where is this warrior of a guy who walked into the temple and threw stuff down, grabbed a whip and started whooping people? Where is that man? Where is that man? Because this guy right here, he seemed to be giving up without fighting. I don't know this guy. Jesus goes on to do his work. Peter was following now at a distance. Notice, Peter was part of Jesus' close inner circle. Now, at this point, confused about the man that he knew and loved, he's now following at a distance. I don't know the implications of that for you. What have you experienced that seemed to violate your understanding of this great God and good God that you know? What have you experienced in a very tangible way? It was like, if there is a good God in heaven, why would he allow that to happen? That's my coffee. Sorry, guys. I got excited. Why would he allow that to happen? Why would he let that happen to me? Why would he sit there? I know if he sees everything, if he's all powerful, why will he let that happen? I'm not that good, and I wouldn't let that happen. Why would a good God let that happen? I'm confused about that. And so you, like Peter, might be following now at a distance. You, like Peter, might be saying, I'm going to go to this church thing, but I think it's fake. But I'm going to give it a try because something is pulling at my heart anyway. But I know some real trifling people, and they go to church, so I'm kind of struggling with this. I'm following, but I'm following at a distance. Following at a distance. Because there's something that I've experienced that seemed to push back against this quote-unquote declaration that God is good, that his people are supposed to be good too. I'm struggling with this. So you're following at a distance like Peter was. Now they're in the courtyard. And Peter is being questioned by a little girl. She looked at Peter. She looked real close at him. And she said, weren't you with him when he did all that? Aren't you his boy? Peter said, I don't know that man. I don't know that man over there. Then the little girl, you know how children do. If you ever been, this is a sidebar, this is why it takes me so long. Anyway, if you know how children do, if you're trying to be discreet about something, if you're trying to be discreet about something and your children know, forget about it. There's no chance for you to be discreet. If they know about it and you're in public, they are telling on you. They are telling on you. Mama, didn't you say you didn't like that girl? Mama, didn't you say that he was trifling? Yes, he is. And you over there, shh, no, we were not, shh. Peter probably was like, shh. Little girl was like, nah, you was with him. You was with him. I seen you with him. Peter said, I was not with him. What you talking about? Girl ain't give up, though. Little kids don't give up. They don't give up easy. She ain't give up. She said, listen, the girl like, man, I know what you're saying, but I think you lying. You was with him. Peter Peter trying to prove a point. When the kids done got to you like they know how to, and you just like, we got to shut this down. So they said Peter started saying some stuff. He became undignified. I don't know what all he said. I wish they wrote it down so I could read it. I said, Peter started calling out all kind of curses. I don't know this man. One account says that at that very time, the prophecy that Jesus had declared was fulfilled. Jesus was there to hear it somehow. Peter was there to live it. And then nature testified about it. Jesus was there to see it. Peter was there to fulfill it. Nature testifies, says that a chicken crowed. I was going to use the substitute where it wasn't going to come out right, so I just kind of move on. I used the check down. The animal sounded as Jesus had promised. You should read the text yourself. I have an accent. Certain words, if I say it, it just don't sound right. Work with me here a little bit. Anyway, as that happened, as nature testified, I should have just left it at that. As nature testified, somehow Peter and Jesus were locked eyes. That's awkward. They locked eyes, and Peter, overcome with emotion at that time, left brokenhearted. Brokenhearted, but I think he was brokenhearted for more than one reason. I think he was brokenhearted because somehow he found himself fulfilling this prophecy that he had vowed that he will not fulfill. Yeah. He was brokenhearted because Peter believed it with all his heart that he was going to stand with Jesus even if it meant death. Yeah. He believed it with all his heart. So he was brokenhearted that he didn't fulfill his promise, but I think he was also brokenhearted because the man who he thought was going to rise and fight did something contrary. He was hurt because the man who he had seen do all kinds of stuff, walk on water, Peter had experienced the extraordinary with this man. Peter himself walked on water with this man. Peter was confident that if Jesus was going to win a fight, he was going to fight with him. But Jesus did not fight. Peter was hurt because he said this man was supposed to, he said he was the Messiah. The Messiah is a heroic person. The Messiah don't give up. The Messiah don't give in. The Messiah does not quit. This man gave it up. He never fight. So he was hurt. He was offended. And then he was hurt that he himself did something contrary to what he wanted to do. I hope you see yourself in the text. I see myself in the text. There are pains like Peter that I have to release. I have pains in my heart because of things that had happened circumstantially and things that I had contributed to. Pains in my heart that I have to release because they're there and I can't deny the fact that they're there. Pain. Brittany and I have the privilege of having a total. We have 4 girls. We love our girls. We do. That's not supposed to be a funny Natalie. We love our girls. We had our oldest child. His name is Corbin. He's our son, our only son, who now we believe is in heaven with his creator. Brittany and I had Corbin prior to us being married while we were out there living a little bit. And we were not in a committed relationship to one another. I was in every way trying to discover what it looks like to follow Jesus, disappointed in myself for not doing it well most of the time. Hear that. Now at a place, girl that I was talking to, she said, I'm pregnant. I said, oh, I got to tell my mama this. So I didn't tell her, I just texted her. I was scared. I said, my mama gonna kill me. So I texted her. My mama passed out at the mall. My sister told me later, you are a coward. But we decided, as unsuccessful as I was being at that time in surrendering my life to Jesus, I was convinced of the fact that life is a gift from God that he gives. I believe that with all my heart. That's not a political stance of mine, it's a belief of mine. When I found myself not following Jesus the way I wanted to, I still believed that life is a gift from God. And so when he's given this gift, I don't really know what to do with this gift right now, but he's given it, so somehow we got to figure it out. So we started, doing all kinds of stuff. going to appointments and, buying clothes, telling that we had a baby shower. We had all the stuff. I was putting together furniture. I don't do that. I don't know how to put together furniture. I ain't know Keith at that time. I was struggling. And so here we are, preparing for our baby boy, having experienced the ups and downs of emotions relative to, readying yourself for a child, deciding that God has given us a gift. We will figure it out later. We're going to focus our energy on nurturing this life. And so we were doing just that, and we were attending one of the last appointments before delivery. Delivery was scheduled the week after. And so we attended the appointment, and at the appointment, they were doing their routine thing, and the nurse started looking nervous. The nurse started looking nervous, and Brittany notices things like that because, she senses her environment well. I was not, in tune. Eventually, she said, you know what, let me get somebody else. I think my machine ain't working right. So she went to go get somebody else, and then they started looking nervous. I said, oh. Now I started noticing too. They nervous. I went, well, everybody, you can't be. If people nervous around you in the hospital, it's just like, why are you nervous? Now I'm nervous. They scanned, and then they got all the machines out. They did all the things, and they were like, hey, we can't find the heartbeat. Can't find the heartbeat. And then, Brittany, your blood pressure is, we don't even know how you're conscious right now. She had a blood pressure, I hope I don't miss it, was like 210/90 or something like that. 150, like she's supposed to be like, like not conscious at that time. We drive over to the hospital. They deliver the baby by C-section, and we held our son, just the shell of his body, and he had gone on to be with the Lord. And I found myself, like Peter, feeling things. I knew my life wasn't surrendered to Jesus the way it should. So I was disappointed at me for not doing that well. But I know life is a gift from God. Why would you give it and take it? Why would you not fight? Why would you hold it out for me to reach out and then you pull it back? Why would you get me all wrapped up in this experience and then all of a sudden snatch it? I was perturbed. That's to say the least. I was frustrated. I was angry, all the things, but then I was angry at God is good, but somehow this part, I'm struggling with this. I'm supposed to be better, and I'm not. I'm even frustrated by that, like Peter. It said Peter, Jesus had appeared to him already. Peter, he had already had Jesus do the miraculous, and he was doing all these things. But now Peter found himself hurt, heartbroken. Peter, he says, I'm going fishing. Peter said, I'm going fishing, I'm stressed. I'm going fishing because I don't really know what to do with all of this. I'm going fishing. I didn't go fishing. I went to go take a shower. I was just like, I need to go sit in the shower for a little bit. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking and I'm mad and I'm crying all the things. And then a public God made himself private. Oh, notice the pattern in the text. Jesus, he would appear publicly, but he ministers privately. He appears publicly and say, I'm here. I'm the king of the universe. But he comes close and he says, I'm here for you though. And that private God met me in my shower. And he began to talk back to me. In my frustration and in my confusion, he says, I know that you're hurt. He said, I hurt more than you do. I love him more than you do. I love you more than you do. He says, this doesn't feel like grace, but this is grace. This doesn't feel like love, but this is love. And he begins to illuminate for me what Corbin's life would have been like with where Brittany and I were relationally. He began to illuminate for me what he would have had to struggle through because of where Brittany and I were. And he said, I love him. And so I held on to him. I held on to him. And I'm holding on to you too. That's a public God who makes himself private. Let me talk about Peter for a second so I can maintain just a little bit. While Peter was out fishing and stressed and carrying on, by the way, I'm encouraged by the fact that when Peter went fishing, he says, this text said the day went fishing. That might be not noticeable for some, but it stood out to me. Peter went fishing, and it said they went fishing. Last week I said, if you're going to overcome your doubts, right, you need to stay in community. When I was hurting and broken, God's people wrapped themselves around me and said, we don't understand either, but we love you and we're here for you. We out here and we're going to journey with you. God's people wrapped themselves around us. Peter went fishing and they went with him. That's good news. They went with him, and while they were out there, this public Jesus made himself known. And I love John and Peter and the situation that they got going on with one another. John says, I recognize him. Peter did not. John said, I said to the rest of them, that's the Lord. And then Peter eventually believed, and then Peter immediately, because he had a pain to release, because he was longing to return. If you look at the text, Peter did not wait for the boat to dock. Peter jumped out. Peter said, okay, that's Jesus, you sure? Okay, that's Jesus over there, you sure? Let me get my stuff. Peter jumped in the water, and if you read later on, he swam about 100 yards. If you've ever played football or watched it, that's the whole length of a football field. It's hard to run that. I've done that. I've run that. I get about 50 yards deep. I said, man, go ahead and tackle me, bro. I don't want this. He swam that whole way because he was longing to return. He was longing to return. He outswam the boat. Come on, man. And that kind of longing and that kind of passion, you can't, like something, there's a hunger and a thirst for those of us who have a pain to release. There's a hunger and a thirst to go to the master that, you can stay over there looking cute, but I'm not trying to be cute right now. I am going to go to the master. Peter swam and went all the way, got there to Jesus, and he started to receive this private ministry. And before Jesus even said a word, he fed them. He fed all of them. And there's so many things layered in this. I can't harvest all of it, but notice, he said that they caught fish after they hadn't been catching fish, the same way he did for him in the beginning of the ministry. Peter went fishing. They started to fish, but they didn't catch nothing. Jesus said, did you catch anything? And they said, nah. So he said, go ahead and cast your net. There's a man who was preaching a sermon. He only preached for 7 minutes. He was graced by God. He was fresh out of the military, and he used for an illustration his boots. He had one boot, his right boot. He says, this is trust. And he had a second boot. He says, this is obey. He says, trust and obey is all you need to follow Jesus. And then he sat down. Hey, come on. That might be a simple sermon, but I'm telling you, it is enduring. Trust and obey. Have you caught any fish? You've been toiling your whole life. Did you catch anything? They said no. And Jesus said, trust and obey. Cast the net. Trust and obey. Cast the net. They did. They caught something. Trust, obey. They did. They brought all the stuff to the shore. It says they caught 153 fishes. Did I say that correctly? Sort of. If you read some commentaries, they said that represents the species of fish that were present at that time, realizing that that what God had called Peter and the disciples to do is to go out to all the world, bar none, to go to the people who looked like them and the people who did not look like them, to go out and to spread their nets without reservation, and to pull back together into one family, one new family out of all people. The beauty of the gospel subtle within an illustration. Then they got there and Jesus fed them. He fed them, met their practical needs. He met their practical needs, and then he began to do this private ministry to Peter. He says, Peter, do you love me more than these? What is these, Jesus? The fish or these boys? Do you love me more than these? If you look at that, there is a double entendre there. There's so much here. Just bear with me just a little bit. Maybe more than these, meaning the fishes, meaning like you love me more than this material thing that I've just provided for you. Do you love me more than what I can give you? Hear the Lord asking you this morning. Do you love me more than the material need that I can provide for you and that I will as I see fit? Do you love me more than these? But then the other part, he's saying, do you love me more than these, your brothers? Peter had boasted for most of his journey with these people that I love you more than these boys do. Hear that. Jesus, in his restoring journey, confronts him face to face with the awkward moment. Jesus is not going to sit in a room and let the elephant not be addressed. Jesus confronted him directly and said, do you love me more than these, your brothers, like you've always said? Peter responds and saying, you know I love you. But if you go back and you read the type of love that Peter said, Jesus said, do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally? Peter said, Jesus, you know I like you. And this might be subtle for you, but it's profound. And then Jesus asked him again, do you love, and then Jesus gave him a command, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Jesus asked him again, a second time now. Do you agape me? Peter says, Jesus, you know you my boy. If you read the translation, Peter's declaration of love was not at the same intensity of love that Jesus was communicating. It says, feed my sheep. Then Jesus asked him one more time. Ah, man, if you read the gospel, you'll see the hope in that. Peter, do you love me? This time, Peter, facing the pain of his emotion, seeing that this God does in fact love him. And Peter said, he's heartbroken, but he said, Jesus, you know I love you. But not daring to say the type of love that Jesus was declaring. He wasn't saying, I agape you. He said, Jesus, you know I got you. What is subtle for you was a bold statement by Peter. What appears minimal for you, for Peter, was perhaps the longest distance he had traveled. Peter traveled from being an extremely self-confident person, knowing good and well he can love Jesus even better than Jesus, to now recognizing the limitations of his love and saying, Jesus, I want to love you, but the truth is I don't love you like I want to love you. Jesus, I like you, but I don't love you the way that you love me. Man, that was a great realization for me. If you love me, obey my commandments, says the word of God. And we say, oh, I love you, Lord, and we sing the songs, but then when I start to think about it, I stop for a second. And saying, if love means to obey your commands, and I know me, I realize, God, I haven't been following your commandments at all. Even if when I try, I mess up. So the truth is, I don't love you like that, but that hurts to say. But I like you, and I want to love you. That was the start of transformation for me. That was the start of acknowledging the truth. I want to love you, God, but in and of myself right now, I don't love you the way that you've called me to love you. I don't love you in a way that surrenders to you in the way that you've asked me to surrender. God appreciates you and I's honesty. He meets you there. Jesus fed Peter and began to minister to him because he wanted to be reconciled with him and he wanted to commission him again. Peter had a pain to release. He had a longing to return. He had a meal to receive. He had practical needs. And he had a need for reconciliation, a need for reconciliation. Reconciliation is different from forgiveness. You might want to ask, how? Reconciliation is different from forgiveness. Forgiveness says that I'm making peace with the past. Something happened. It has happened. I hate that it happens, but I'm making peace with it. You denied me. I'm making peace with that. I hope you make peace with that too, Peter. As a matter of fact, I'm going to help you make peace with it, Peter. You denied me 3 times. I'm going to help you confirm your love for me 3 times. Notice that in the text. Do you love me? Yes, I do. Do you love me? Yes, I do. Do you love me? A 3rd time. I'm going to help you make peace with the past. Reconciliation is not just making peace with the past, it's actually making plans for the future. Forgiveness is making peace with the past. Reconciliation is making plans for the future. If you notice the progression in the text, Jesus begins to say, hey, not only do I forgive you, but actually I have a plan for you, Peter, even now. I'm inviting you into this great narrative even now. On the idea that you declared way earlier in our relationship, I'm still going to do that work. And I'm still going to use you to do that work, Peter. You need to be restored. We need to be reconciled. So feed my sheep. Leave this fishing behind and now get to shepherding. Feed my sheep.